Welcome to the second part of my bowl turning series. In this episode, we're going to look at the outside of the bowl. I'm going to turn the base, in this case it's going to be a foot, but I'll explore different options. And then I'm going to turn the outside shape, showing you the push cut, the pull cut, and the shear cut. I hope you enjoy watching. With the blank turn to this point, my next decision is how big the base is going to be. Now, there's several ways I could finish the base on this. In this case, I'm going to go for a decorative foot, but I'll show you some options in a moment. We're always better off to start too big, and I can always make that a little bit smaller. But as a rough guide, if you're not sure, the thirds rule is a good place to start. So my blank is, now I've trued it up, about 245 millimeters. So if we divide that by 3, we're somewhere near 80 mil. So if I work on it being somewhere between 80 and 90 mil, the base, let's go 90 for now. I know that's on the big side, but it depends a little bit on what you're going to do with the bowl. If this is going to be a practical use fruit bowl, a bigger base probably is going to be better. If it's something a little bit more arty, a little bit more decorative, a smaller base might work better for that. So I'm going to start with around 90 mil. We can always make it smaller, but that is around about a third, and that's a really good starting point. When it comes to designing the base or the foot of the bowl, there's a few different options. With this, because it's quite a low bowl, it's only 3 inches or 75 mil, having a simple curve on the outside going down to just a flat base could leave the bowl feeling quite kind of low and heavy on the table. That design works if you've got a naturally taller bowl. So this bowl is much taller, and we've got a nice simple curve that goes down to a little simple base. And that works really well. Because it naturally stands taller, it's not a problem. With a lower bowl like this, probably a little foot of some sort would work well. Now this one is a slightly more advanced bowl. This one has a bit of a recurve or an incurving rim, which is a nice feature. And I'll probably look at one of these bowls after I've finished this series. But this has a little foot, and probably the simplest type of foot, in that the curve of the outside comes round and there's a little flick that goes onto the foot. And that gives quite a low bowl a little bit of a lift off the table. So there's a bit of a shadow underneath, gives it a bit of interest and stops it looking too low or heavy. Now you could ignore the foot entirely and have a round bottom bowl. This works quite well, but it works better in smaller bowls, I think. A bowl of this size and above probably wouldn't work terribly well as a sort of rocking bowl, but a small bowl like this with a round bottom that rocks is a point of interest, bit of a discussion point. I think it might just be a bit annoying on a bowl that size. So what we're going to go for, this is the bowl that we're going to be making. Very simple curve as I've discussed earlier, and a foot. But this foot is a little bit more decorative, very classic. So we've got a fillet and a scotia. A scotia is like a half cove. And that is what we're going to go for. So the foot, again, is controllable. We can make it whatever size is going to work for this bowl, but I think that works quite well. So that's roughly where we're going to go, and it's going to be this type of foot that I'm going to turn, but it's entirely up to you. It's your bowl. You can do exactly what you want with it. With the blank running about 900 RPM, I've got the foot defined, and it is a little oversized. We're about 100 mil at the moment, but that gives us an idea of where I want it, and I can make that smaller if I want to later. This tenon will be removed completely at the end, but for now that stays put. So I'm going to come in again with the bowl gouge, and the tool rests at that height where I can hit the center of the bowl standing comfortably. So I'm going to cut in and just use that pull cut or the draw cut just to remove more timber here. So in, little skid, that's okay. Just close the flute a little more. If you get that little skid, just close the flute a little bit more. That'll allow you to get in. All this wood that I'm removing needs to be gone. Again, that's a fairly aggressive cut. Some fairly heavy shavings going on there. Excuse me. But if you're unsure, start with the flute over that 10 o'clock, using near the tip so you're getting those smaller shavings, and only engage more wing once you feel comfortable. Okay, really important that. So that has defined the foot. It's oversized. It's, let's see how deep it is. It's currently about 8 mil. Maybe we'll go a little bit deeper later, but that's defined it for now. The next thing to do is to start adding some shape into the bowl. The foot is defined and I can start shaping the outside of the bowl now, and I'm just going to keep developing that pull cut or the draw cut. So we're still here, and I'm going to start developing the corner. So here, just take a little bit off. And you can see how the shape is going to develop from there. Again, just developing it gradually. I'm not going to just start here, plow my way through. It's just going to be fighting the wood, and you don't really want to be doing that. You've got to work with the wood. So that's good. The curve, it's a very simple curve, but the curve will start right next to the foot and it will go right up to the rim. But again, it's a little bit at a time. Now, some people might be wondering why I bothered with that truing up cut. Some people would probably ask, why would I not just do this shaping? Surely that's quicker. And it is, but the problem is if you get your bowl all shaped up and then stop it to have a look at the blank, and there's a patch of bandsaw marks just on one side here, say, then you've got to cut down, get rid of those marks, and it's going to reshape the whole bowl. You can't just take a little bit off here. You've got to work on that whole shape again. So by turning the blank and truing up the blank at the start, we know exactly what material we've got to deal with. Now, let's have a look at the cut that we're getting here. This is working with the grain, that's good. Here you can see in that patch there and this patch here, they're a little bit coarse. Let's see, yes, you can see that on the picture. A little bit coarse. That's not a problem at this stage. This draw cut, this pull cut, it's very efficient. Doesn't always leave a very clean surface, but it is efficient, so it will remove that wood quickly. Once I'm closer to the shape that I'm after, then we can start dealing with these slightly coarse. I wouldn't even call that torn, but it certainly is coarse and it certainly needs addressing, but not yet. So let's do a bit more turning. So I'm going to adjust the tool rest, bring the tool rest around a little bit so that I can get up here, develop this a bit further. Okay. Okay, let me bring you around and show you an interesting point here. The angle I've put you at here just shows the profile that we're working on. I'm looking for a continuous curve that goes from that foot right up to the rim. At the moment, it's fairly straight here, and then there's a big curve, and it finishes quite kind of at 90 degrees. So you can see how that's the base, that's the side, and it finishes pretty much square to the base, if that makes sense. Ideally, to make this look more elegant, I want the point that the curve hits the rim to still be at a bit of an angle like that. That will give us a much better curve, and it kind of looks like there's somewhere for the curve to still go to. When you bring it right up square like that, it just takes some of the elegance away from it. So something to work on is to not leave the rim of the bowl square to the foot. Try and hit the rim at a bit of an angle like that. I hope that makes sense. To achieve that curve and to have that rim at that angle, it means you generally have to remove more wood from here, this kind of area, than you would perhaps expect, because by removing wood from here, it allows the curve to flow up to the rim. So I'm going to remove some more wood from here. All the time, the tool, that was me lifting the tool off the rest. All the time the tool is tucked in my side and it's my body that's doing the movement. good. So that's allowed, removing the weight from here has allowed me to push the curve up a little bit further. So let's bring that around. That's worked quite well. I'm probably going to remove a little bit more though. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that process. Do a little bit more weight from down here, and that's going to allow me. It's going to allow me to produce the curve that I want up further up here. I've moved you one more time so you're right behind the bowl so you can see the shape developing. Now this shape's coming on really nicely. I think I want just a little bit more weight from here, and again that will just help me push that curve up a little bit further. So I'm starting off right down here, right at the foot. As I'm turning, I'm looking here, but for you, I'm looking at the equivalent of here. So I'm actually watching this profile develop as I'm turning. Now you can see my cuts are much lighter now, and a lighter cut, just by its nature, will disturb the wood far less. So the finish, the surface finish, will be better from this cut. Without me changing it, it's still the same draw cut or pull cut that I've been doing the whole time, but just by doing lighter cuts, because I'm very close to the shape that I want now, just by doing those lighter cuts, the surface of the wood will be a better finish. That's better. And you can see what I was saying earlier about how the curve now is hitting the top corner there. It's no longer square, it's very much hitting it at an angle, which is really what I was after. And it's a pretty good fluid curve. Let's look at the surface. So that bit's fine, but we come onto here, we've got a rough patch just there, which you can see. It's smooth, and then we've got a rough patch just there. Now those rough patches are exactly where I would expect them to be. So let me explain that for you. So looking at my bowl, the grain, you can see from the base here that the grain is running that way. Excuse my drawing, that's an arrow. The grain is running that way, side to side. So as we're looking at this, this part of the bowl is really smooth because I'm working with the grain. I'm going literally how the wood wants to be cut. This is a bit like stroking down the neck of a dog. It's really smooth and it's lovely until you get to the end grain point. That is the point where we go from going with the grain to suddenly the fibers are now pointing towards us. And what you tend to get is in this quadrant, now on this bowl it's slightly further around, it's just there, we get this rough patch, and that is where the fibers are really pointing right at us, and suddenly it's like stroking up the neck of a dog. So it's not smooth, the fibers, you're fighting the fibers, you're going against them, and it picks them up there. Then we get to the halfway mark, and suddenly we're now with the fibers again. So the grain's running here, it's smooth, it's lovely, that's going back down the neck of the dog, nice and smooth, till you hit the end grain point, and again, we're back at those fibers. Those fibers are coming back at us, and here is the rough patch until we get to halfway, and again it's smooth. So you can split the bowl into 4 quadrants really. So where the grain is running across, when you're working with the grain here, in that quadrant it's smooth, the next quadrant is coarse because the grain's coming up at you, the next quadrant is smooth, and then the next quadrant is coarse. But if those are your rough patches, that's exactly where they should be, and if that's where they are, that's fine, we can deal with that. If you've got rough patches in other places, you've got bigger problems. Now, it might be that your tool's blunt, it might be that you've got sort of a soft, punky, spalted type wood, that can be an issue as well. But on your standard run-of-the-mill blank of wood, this is what I would expect to find. And if you're getting what you expect, we can deal with it. So these rough patches are what we're going to deal with next. The profile of the shape of the bowl, pretty much where I want it. Now we're going to address the surface finish. The draw cut or the pull cut that I've been using so far has been very efficient. It's got us to this point really quite quickly, so that's great. but it doesn't always leave the best finish. So what I need to do now is do more of a finishing cut. So there's two that I can show you, and the sort of traditional one would be what's known as a push cut. So a push cut is a bevel rubbing cut. So we're going to have to get the bevel of the tool, and we've talked about the bevel lots in previous videos, but that's the bevel pointing just there. I'll do this again a bit closer so you can see real detail here in a moment, but the long shot is going to be useful to you to see where the handle needs to be. So this is a 50-degree bevel angle, and that is where the bevel is rubbing. So this is going to be a bevel rubbing cut, so very much like the cuts I did at the start when I was truing up the blank. So the bevel's here, and to keep that bevel rubbing, I'm going to have to bring my handle round as I progress around the shape of the bowl. So we're here, and as I go round, the bevel's going to have to keep rubbing. The handle's going to have to come round this way, and by the end of the push cut, I'm going to finish about there. Now, at no point, because this is a fairly shallow bowl, quite an easy curve, I've got the tool rest in a position there that I shouldn't need to move it. I've not really ever got a huge overhang. That's my biggest overhang, and that's still only, what, 1 inch? That's not going to be a problem. Bigger bowls, deeper bowls, at several points you're going to have to adjust your tool rest. For this, I don't think I am. I should be okay. But I'm going to start here, and I'm going to push around as smoothly as I can. Now, the key word here is smooth. The smoother you can move your tool from here to here, the smoother the surface is going to be. Every time that you hesitate or move or adjust yourself or jerk or do something weird, it's going to translate as a bump or a lump or a fault in the shape that you're producing. What I'm trying to do here is get the best surface finish and shape that I possibly can. Now the shape is about right. So really what I'm trying to do here is take like a peel of skin off. So imagine you're peeling the skin off an orange. I want to take 1 mil, 2 mil off here, all the way around, and what's beneath that should be a lovely smooth surface, because the push cut, because it's bevel rubbing, should leave a very slightly burnished surface. Now, when we say rubbing, it's not that hard. The bevel is touching, the bevel is rubbing, but it's not really crushing the fibers. It's not that much pressure. Okay, so let's fire up the lathe. We could probably go a little bit faster now. Let's get up there. That's just over 1,000. Yeah, just over 1,000 RPM. That's running quite nicely. So we can start, if the handle's too far that way, that's just the bevel. Nothing's happening there. So that's a good place to start. That's a little bit like when you're spindle turning, you start with your handle too low and then you lift into the cut. It's exactly the same here. So the bevel's rubbing, and what I'm going to do is bring the handle this way. In spindle turning, you lift the handle. For this, I'm basically lifting the handle still, but it's coming this way. And engage the edge. There's the cut, okay? Just there. So it's a nice light cut. You can see I've got a little step, and ideally I want that step the same size all the way around. Now, what you do with your front hand is up to you. Over the top, underneath, whatever works for you, really. I'm going to start, let's start underneath. But the movement is coming from my backhand and my body. It's not, my front hand is not controlling the tool beyond giving a downward pressure onto the tool rest. Now I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to see what the surface finish is like. I would expect this to be better than that. I'll give you a close-up so you can see exactly what the difference is. So the remains of this pencil line is where I was drawing those quadrants, and this is the quadrant where I was running with the grain, and there's not a huge difference in the quality between my push cut and the pull cut, the draw cut from earlier. As we get up to that line that I put on where we're now fighting against the grain, you can see that the draw cut, the pull cut, had this really torn surface here, but the push cut is leaving me a far superior, much smoother surface, and that the depth of that cut is 1 millimeter, maybe 1 and a bit millimeters, and that's all it takes. So this damage doesn't run that deep, but it would be incredibly difficult to get rid of using abrasive. So A well-controlled push cut is really what you want to achieve that surface. I'm going to adjust the camera again so you can see me finish this push cut from a really close-up angle. I'm going to just pick up that cut where I left off, and we'll just finish this cut. Now I'm going to do my best to not knock the camera as I do, but should be okay. It's probably worth noting I haven't sharpened the tool yet. This was sharpened well at the start of the project, and I haven't touched it yet. So this nice smooth surface that you've seen on there is the same edge. So, you know, a nice bit of ash like this doesn't take the edge off that much. Some woods might. Some woods are more abrasive, but ash, or this piece of ash, is okay. You can see the shavings I'm getting. I'm getting really nice shavings. Now these are much longer and finer shavings. Shavings like that, if you're getting those sort of shavings, you can almost guarantee the surface that's left behind is a good one. So a nice, slow, smooth, controlled cut leaves a pretty good surface. Now, looking at the profile, probably needs a little bit of work. Where I've stopped, I've not picked up them quite as well as I'd like. So there's another cut I can show you. If you're struggling with the push cut and you're still getting little ridges, little lumps, little lines, there's another cut I'm going to show you now. The other cut that I want to show you is what's known as a shear cut. So when I'm doing the drill cut or the pull cut, the flute is up at this sort of 10 o'clock position and we're cutting just on the wing somewhere there. The shear cut is quite similar and the body position is quite similar, but the presentation of the tool does change quite a bit. The handle is still low, but the flute is rotated almost completely the wrong way around. I'm still using this lower wing, it's this wing still, so this top wing doesn't need to come into contact, but the flute is facing almost completely into the wood. So as I'm cutting, I'm actually just using this lower wing, this wing here, and this is why it's important to try and get, if you remember from the sharpening video, it's why it's important to try and get that convex edge on that edge there, because that will allow you to do that shear cut. So the handle's low, the flute is almost closed the wrong way, and I'm just using this sharp edge against the wood at a sort of, it would bounce around 45 degrees. It probably isn't 45 degrees, but you will know what I mean when I say that. We're at this kind of angle, the edge is at that kind of angle and taking a really fine shaving. Now, how I've got the camera set up, it's not terribly practical for turning. I'm going to try and just get a few shavings and then I'll move the camera out of my way so I can actually do the cut. But to show you what you should be seeing, the flute is closed. So when it's not a bevel rubbing cut anymore, this is a shearing cut. So it's a very light cut. There's not a great deal of pressure, just a little bit of contact there, and you can see straight away the shavings I'm getting are these little wisps. Long, thin, wispy strands like that tell you that the shaving's fine, so the surface finish is going to be excellent. So we're here, handle is low, tucked into your side, and we're just going to bring the tool around. Now, working from the base to the rim is the correct direction, and you need to do that really when you're bevel rubbing. There are instances when it can work going the other way, but you need very friendly wood and a very sharp tool to get away with it. The correct way to do it is to work from the base to the rim. Now, with shear cutting, that is slightly less important, and you can get away with going in either direction for this. But that is the sort of cut that you'll be making, and these are the sort of shavings that you're looking for. So now with the camera back out of the way, you can see the handle's low, the flute is closed, and I'm just working now with this very light cut, just back and forth, just making sure that the flow of the shape is just right, making sure any little ridges, any lumps or bumps that I don't want to be there are gone. Again, nice light cut with these really fine, light, fibres coming off. And as I'm working, I've just got my eye at the top here at the profile that I'm making to make sure that the shape that I've created is a really lovely fluid curve. I always find this cut's useful if, you know, some days the push cut will go better than others, and some days it'll be perfect straight off the tool. Other days might not be quite as good and it needs a little bit more adjustment, shall we say. And so that's what I'm doing here. We're just going over it just to make sure any lines, humps, bumps, lumps, whatever left over from the push cut are going to be gone. But the surface finish is already good from the push cut. It's very unlikely that those shavings are telling me that it's going to stay good. It's very unlikely that you're going to disturb the surface using a shear cut. Sometimes you might. It really depends on the wood, but a nice sharp tool and a light touch and you should be able to get a really good surface finish. The next job, now that I've got the outside of the bowl turned, is to put the little scotia detail into the foot. So for this I'm going to use a spindle gouge. You could use a bowl gouge, but I feel like a spindle gouge is much better for doing these little detail shapes. So handle's low, the handle is in my side. I'm actually going to use my body to create the shape. So again, my front hand is just there to keep the tool down onto the tool rest. And I'm going to go round and round and round. Now, it's quite possible that the foot is a bit too deep, and if it is, I'll just remove more wood. That's fine, but we'll see how we go with this. You're better off having the foot too deep and having to reduce it than it not being deep enough and then having to cut back into the bowl and then reshape the bowl again. So either way, you're going to have to remove material if you've got it wrong, but we'll see how we go. That's pretty good, actually. It probably is a little bit on the deep side. We can always reduce it later if I think that's a problem. That's quite a nice little scotia there. And then I'm just going to crisp up this little fillet. The fillet is the little flat area that kind of breaks up and divides the scotia from the bowl. And again, I'm going to come in with my skew chisel, but as a scraper. I just move that back so that I wasn't on the bevel of the tool. So we're flat on the rest there. I'm just going to push that in as a scraper, really lightly, not removing a great deal of material, but just crisping it up, making sure it's nice and fluid. Everything blends in well, nice and crisp and sharp. Pretty happy with that. I wonder if we just need a little bit more off the top there. I've got a little step, a little edge. There we go, that's better. That's it. Good. So that foot, I think maybe a little deep, but I can deal with that later. Otherwise, we're ready to sand. When it comes to sanding, I like to use a combination of power sanding and hand sanding. Power sanding is a really great tool to use to very quickly smooth out the surface, get rid of any of the really fine little lines that might be left from the turning. The downside to power sanding is it can be quite aggressive and it's very easy to misshape the bowl, and especially with a wood like ash, which has very open grain, it's very easy to sort of pick out the softer fibers from in between the harder grain, and you can add a texture that you don't really want to do just by over sanding. So it's very easy to over sand using power sanding. So what I tend to do is use 180 on the power sander, get that really nice and smooth, and then just take it through with hand pads, 240, 320, and then finish off with a red abrasive pad at the end. So we're going to fire up the lathe and the dust extractor. And the lathe's now running about 500, just over 500 RPM. You don't need a lot of speed here. You've got quite a bit of speed here. So too much speed here and here just means the abrasive kind of skids over it and doesn't really do its job properly. So take the speed down, somewhere around 500 is usually pretty good. and then whatever the drill's running at. So thing to remember here now is the drill, this is not a drill to drill holes anymore, this is now a turning tool. So this is now tucked into my side, just as any other turning tool would be, and I'm using the lower part of the pad. No point using the top, it will just push it away. So it's here. If you want to be upside down, that works too, no problem. That can sometimes be quite a comfortable way of doing it. So we're going to fire up the drill and we're going to keep moving. Now you want to keep the pad quite perpendicular to the wood. You never really want to dig the side of the pad in. It's very easy to end up with extra grooves and things that you didn't really want. So keep the pad as square onto the wood as possible. So it's going to come right round like that. Lots of movement again on the lower part of the pad. Okay, so we're going to be here. And hopefully you can see the dust coming off of that, and that dust is going straight down the chute, exactly where I want it to. Now I'm not going to touch this. This I'll sand by hand. I'm really just on this nice curve of the bowl. And I put it on the longer shot there so you could see really my body movement and how I handle the drill. It doesn't really give you much of an advantage to see close up what's going on with the pad. So that will probably be enough. It's worth just stopping the lathe just to have a little look at that. But yeah, that's done everything that I wanted it to. That's nice and smooth. That's got rid of the few very fine little lines that were on there. And now I'm going to go and sand that by hand. For hand sanding, you can increase the speed a little bit. Let's go back up to about, what's that, 750, something like that, along those lines. And I've just folded the abrasive up and I'm just going right in against that foot detail there, and we're going to come around. Again, keep the abrasive moving, just nice, slow, smooth passes. And I'm going to sand the foot as well. So there, there. Not really a need to sand that face, we're going to do that right at the end when we remove the tenon. I want to just make sure I'm right in there and that the grain is clean and the surface is clean right into that corner. So again, stop the lathe as often as you need to check that. Yeah, pretty happy with that. So now we can just go and move through the grits. I actually started on 180 there. That's 180. This is 240. Oops, nearly. Fold it in half. Sanding is a two-handed operation. If you're just sanding like that, just leaning on the lathe, that abrasive will be gone down the chute, and you'll spend time searching for it. It's a two-handed operation. I support my hand there, and I'm actually pinching the abrasive into my hand, so I've got a good firm hold of it. And again, I'm moving my body with my arms. You want a good flexible abrasive that you can fold up and roll up and get into those details. So that's 240 and then 320. Now you'll notice in between each grit I just wipe it over with my hand, and you can see there's dust on my hand. It's really good to get rid of that excess dust. And I'll explain a bit more about that when we get on the inside, because it's even more important on the inside. And then I finish nearly everything that I do using a red abrasive pad. Now these red abrasive pads, they're kind of a synthetic steel wool, if you like. They're a woven abrasive, and the red is the equivalent to 600, so it's really fine. But it does the job that, if you've seen the old timers grab a handful of shavings and rub the shavings against the work, that's really what that does. Now the problem with shavings is that if you're rubbing these fine ones against the wood, that's fine, no problem. But remember those shavings we were making at the start, if you rub those against the wood, you're more likely to scratch it than burnish it. So using this abrasive pad gives me that same lovely burnished effect, but I know exactly what I'm rubbing against the bowl, and so it's going to give me that lovely, slightly shiny surface. Yeah, you can just see that bit of shine in the picture there, and that is the outside of our bowl pretty much done. That's the outside of the bowl finished, and you can see there's a lovely sheen on there, and that's just from the turning and sanding process. There's no finish been put on that at all yet. So we're now ready to get that turned over, put in the chuck and hollowed out, but that's for the next video. So until then, enjoy your turning, and I'll see you in the next video.